I'm Rebecca Miller, 27 years old, and I still remember the smell of sawdust clinging to my dad's coat when he hugged me after work every evening. He'd built our hardware store from nothing, brick by brick, and called it Miller's Supply because it was for all of us. My brother Cameron would help out summers stacking paint cans while I sat on the counter drawing signs in crayon. Dad said, I had a mind built for more, and he never let me forget it the last time we were all together. Before everything changed, we were grilling hot dogs by the lake, and Cameron handed me a coffee shop gift card with a half smile. Just don't get too good for us, he said. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to make it on your own when no one believed you. I grew up in a quiet Seattle neighborhood just off 23rd Avenue, where everyone knew your name and borrowed sugar from your back door. Our house was a blue 2-story with peeling shutters, but Dad said the inside had everything we needed. Pancakes on Sundays, Mom's camcorder buzzing on Christmas morning, and a patchy lawn that Cameron swore he'd mow, but never did. Our parents. Diane and Robert believed in hard work and decency. Dad worked with his hands all day and came home with knuckles scraped raw, but he never missed a school play or science fair. Mom kept the fridge full and the bills paid and told us both we were special in different ways. But even as a kid, I could tell Cameron needed to hear it more. I was the quiet one, the type who lined up her pencils before homework and color-coded flashcards for fun. I loved numbers. I loved puzzles. I liked knowing that if you added the right things in the right order, something useful would come out on the other side. Teachers praised me. Mom posted every A on the fridge, and Dad once shut the store early when I won the 8th grade science fair. He said we'd never been to a restaurant with cloth napkins, so he took us to one. Cameron was 4 years older and had charm, the kind that made people laugh and forgive him easily. He bounced between majors at the community college and then quit altogether, saying he was ready for real-world work. Mom said he had street smarts that couldn't be taught. Cameron started helping full-time at the store, and slowly Dad began training him on the books, inventory, payroll, vendor calls. I thought it was smart, but as my Stanford acceptance letter came in with a scholarship that made Mom cry happy tears, things started shifting. Not loud, not all at once, but in the quiet moments. Cameron rolled his eyes when I mentioned my classes. Mom changed the subject when Dad bragged about my app project. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and the conversation would stop. Still, that summer before college felt like a goodbye, wrapped in old routines. Dad gave me a new laptop for school. Cameron grilled chicken in the backyard, and for a moment, I believed we were still whole. I packed my bags and left for California with hugs at the airport and a promise to call every Sunday. What I didn't know was that home would never feel like home again. The first phone call came during midterms. I was in the dorm library with a coffee that had gone cold when my phone lit up with Mom's name. Her voice shook as she said Dad had collapsed at the store while helping a customer load lumber. The doctor said it was a massive heart attack. He'd need surgery right away, triple bypass, and months of recovery after that. I asked if I should come home. I was already looking at my calendar, ready to drop classes if I had to, but Mom said no. Your father would never forgive us if we disrupted your education, she told me. Cameron's taking care of everything. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I nodded and promised to call again the next day. Still, I booked a flight. Stanford had a short break between midterms and finals. I flew home that week and went straight from the airport to the house. It didn't feel the same anymore. The living room had been turned into a makeshift recovery space. There were medical machines lined up beside the recliner where Dad now spent most of his time. His face looked smaller, thinner. In the kitchen, past due bills were stacked in a basket beside the microwave. I'd never seen clutter like that in our house before. Mom looked tired in a way that couldn't be fixed with sleep. Cameron seemed to move with urgency but not direction. I tried to help, suggested some simple scheduling tools for the store, offered to set up a better inventory system. Cameron didn't want to hear it. He pushed away from the kitchen table and said, I don't need advice from my college kid sister. Mom stepped in quickly, telling him he was doing his best. She means well, she added, but the tone made it clear I was an outsider now. When I flew back to school, I did so with a knot in my stomach. I tried to convince myself that finishing my degree was still the right thing. Dad would want me to. I sent money home, small amounts from my scholarship that I could spare. Cameron returned the checks with a note that said, "We're not a charity case." That summer, I went home again hoping things might be better. They weren't. The house felt heavy. Dad was recovering slowly but still couldn't go back to the store. Cameron was trying to run it himself, and it was clearly more than he could handle. Longtime employees had left. Customers were complaining. Inventory was a mess. Mom spent most of her time between Dad's needs and the store's paperwork. When I cooked meals or helped with laundry, she'd redo what I'd done, muttering that this isn't how we do things. I tried not to take it personally, but I was starting to feel like a guest in the house I grew up in. One night over dinner, I told them about an internship offer I'd received from a tech startup in San Francisco. It was competitive paid and would give me real-world experience in app development. Cameron put down his fork so hard it rattled the dishes. "Of course you're leaving," he said. "Some of us don't have the luxury of running off to play with computers." Dad tried to speak, but Mom cut him off. "Your father needs stability. We all do. Maybe this internship can wait." I didn't say anything then. I just cleared the table and went to my room. That night I cried into my pillow, unsure of what I was supposed to do. I had never felt more torn between obligation and hope. A few days later, Dad found me packing. I hadn't made a decision yet. I was just organizing my things to feel like I had control over something. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, "You have a gift, Becca. Don't waste it trying to fix what isn't yours to fix." The words gave me the courage to leave, but not the comfort. The morning I left, Mom gave me a quick hug at the door. Cameron didn't come home the night before. The cab was waiting, so I didn't look back. The internship changed everything. My supervisor recognized my skills early and gave me more complex work. I loved the challenge. The team was small, tight-knit. I learned how to build something from the ground up. When I called home to share the news, Mom picked up. I told her I might be offered a permanent role after graduation. She didn't say much, just that Dad had taken a turn and was back in the hospital. She passed the phone to Cameron before I could ask more, but he said he needed to call a supplier and hung up. That fall, things got quieter. Fewer phone calls, less contact. I still sent updates, but no one responded. By winter break, I had something else to share, an idea for an app that used artificial intelligence to help young adults build personal financial plans. It had started as a project for class, but it was inspired by watching my own family struggle with money. I hoped it could grow into something more. I flew home for Christmas, hoping we could reconnect. The house looked different this time. Decorations were up but uneven. The lights didn't work on one side of the tree. The gutters were sagging. Dad was in a hospital bed in the living room, hooked up to oxygen, asleep under a thin blanket. When he opened his eyes and saw me, he smiled like no time had passed. "There's my girl," he whispered. "Stanford, treating you all right?" We talked quietly while Mom made dinner. He asked about my professors and my classes, and nodded proudly when I told him about the app. His voice was weak, but his eyes stayed sharp. Later, I found overdue notices hidden under a cookbook. Mortgage payments, utility bills, medical fees. I asked Mom if they needed help. She said, "We're handling it," and tucked the papers away. I offered again. "I've saved almost all my internship money. I can help." She shook her head. "Your brother is handling it. He's the one making sacrifices." That night, Cameron came home smelling like beer. He barely looked at me. The next morning, I made breakfast, Dad's favorite pancakes, but Cameron walked in late and muttered, "Playing house for the holidays, huh?" I asked if I could visit the store, maybe help with the inventory system. He laughed. "Right. The college genius swoops in to save the day." I tried again with Mom that afternoon. Laid out a plan. I could send $15,000 in monthly installments without touching my education fund. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to help. "Stop," she said. "You think money solves everything. Cameron has given up everything for this family." That night was Christmas Eve. I had brought gifts. A scarf for Mom. A tool set for Cameron. A book for Dad. Dad's fever worsened overnight. The next day I overheard Cameron and Mom in the living room. "We should ask her," she whispered. "She said she has savings." "No," Cameron said. "She'll hold it over us forever." I stepped into the room. "You don't have to ask. I want to help. Please. Take the money, no strings." Cameron stood up slowly. "You think you can just buy your way back into this family? That's not what I—" "No one wants you here," he shouted. Mom flinched. She didn't argue. She didn't say a word. I turned to her. "Mom!" She stared at the floor. "Maybe it would be better if you left early." I nodded. "I'll pack my things." I didn't say goodbye to Cameron. I stopped by Dad's bed one last time. He opened his eyes. I told him, "They're making me leave." He squeezed my hand. "Go. Build your life. Don't look back for us." Outside, snow had started falling. I called Amanda. That night, I slept in her guest room, surrounded by the warmth of people who didn't owe me anything. 3 days later, Mom called. Dad was asking for me. I went straight to the hospital. He was alone, eyes barely open. He reached out, held my hand, and whispered, "Promise me you won't waste your gift." I promised. Then he was gone, and the rest of them didn't even save me a seat at his funeral. The sky was gray the morning of my father's funeral. I stood at the back of the small church behind the last pew, unsure where I belonged. Diane and Cameron sat in the front row, side by side, surrounded by neighbors and former employees from the store. No one made space for me. I watched as Cameron delivered a short eulogy. He spoke about Dad's work ethic, about Miller's Supply and Sunday fishing trips, and how he hoped to carry on the legacy. My name never came up. I waited until the service ended before stepping forward. A few people nodded politely as I passed. Aunt Judith was the only one who came to me. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "This isn't right, Rebecca. You should have been sitting with them." I nodded but didn't speak. After the burial, I approached Mom. Quietly asked if I could keep one of Dad's old books, just something to remember him by. She looked through me like I wasn't even standing there, then turned to hug a neighbor. That was when I knew. Whatever part of the family I had been, I wasn't anymore. I returned to Stanford and tried to focus on finishing the semester, but everything felt heavy. I went to class and took notes, but none of it stayed in my head. At night, I lay awake listening to the radiator tick. Amanda started bringing me food when I skipped meals and sat with me through long, quiet evenings when I couldn't find the words to explain what I was feeling. "You're not alone," she told me one night, "even if it feels like it." I started going on walks again, just around campus at first, then down to the edge of town. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone, but the movement helped. I brought my notebook with me, tried to sketch out the structure for the app idea I'd been working on. Something about budgeting and financial planning tools I wished my family had understood better. Professor Wright pulled me aside after class one day and asked why I'd been quiet. I shrugged, said I'd been dealing with a lot. She nodded, then asked about the financial app I'd mentioned months earlier. "I think you're onto something," she said. "Have you considered applying to the incubator program?" I hadn't. She handed me a brochure. "Deadline's Friday. If you apply, I'll write your recommendation." That night I stayed up until sunrise, outlining every part of the app user flow key features, even a rough logo. It was the first time in weeks I felt focused. I submitted the application with minutes to spare. To cover my own expenses, I picked up extra shifts at the campus cafe, started tutoring undergrads in basic programming, and took a part-time weekend coding job with a small local firm. Most days I left the apartment at 6 a.m. and didn't return until well after dark. 3 months passed. On Mom's birthday, I sent flowers and a card with my new phone number. I didn't know if it would mean anything, but I sent it anyway. The bouquet came back the next day unopened. The envelope had been marked, "Returned to sender" in Cameron's handwriting. A week later, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. Cameron said they were selling the house and closing the store. He ended the message with, "Hope you're enjoying California while we lose everything. This is on you." I deleted it without responding. Then I shut down my social media accounts, changed my email. If they wanted to contact me again, it wouldn't be easy. Professor Wright kept checking in. She introduced me to one of her former students working in tech in Oakland. She reviewed my early code for the app and pushed me to refine it. "This isn't just budgeting," she said. "You're building something that teaches people how to build their future." I graduated with honors that spring. Amanda's family flew in and cheered when my name was called. I'd reserved 2 extra seats for Mom and Cameron. They stayed empty. A few weeks later, I got a letter saying I'd been accepted into a startup accelerator in San Francisco. They offered a small stipend and a place to stay. I packed what I owned into 2 suitcases and moved into a room above a shared workspace with 6 other founders. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The program was fast-paced. We worked 12-hour days and pitched our ideas to anyone who would listen. My app evolved, shifting from basic budgeting to personalized financial roadmaps powered by machine learning. I called it Pathfinder. The tagline was, "Everyone deserves a map." Networking didn't come naturally to me, but I kept showing up. At demo day, I presented my app to a room full of investors. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. Afterward, a woman named Lisa Kwan from a venture capital firm gave me her card. "Let's talk next week," she said. That meeting led to my first round of funding, $2 million to grow the company. I hired 3 people from the accelerator: Marcus, a UX designer with a quiet wit; Deep, a machine learning specialist who could make models do anything; and Jamal, who had a background in regulatory compliance and insisted we get every detail right from day one. We worked out of a warehouse in Oakland, ate takeout at midnight, and celebrated milestones with sparkling water and cheap cookies. It didn't look like success, but it felt like momentum. I started therapy with Dr. Simmons, who helped me make sense of what I'd lost. "Their choices aren't your burden," she said more than once. I wrote those words down and kept them in my wallet. 18 months after my first pitch, Pathfinder launched. Within a week, we had more downloads than we expected in 3 months. When Apple featured us on the homepage, the numbers skyrocketed. I moved into a small apartment with real windows and no roommates. I stood in the living room one night with my keys in my hand and let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from the realization that I'd made it this far alone. I wrote a letter to Dad that night, told him everything, about the app, the people helping me, the life I was trying to build. I burned the letter and let the ashes scatter off the balcony. 3 years had passed since the day Cameron told me no one wanted me. Pathfinder was now valued at over $50 million. We had 2 million active users and press coverage from nearly every major outlet. And then one morning, my name appeared in a Forbes article. 3 days later, I saw Cameron's name in my inbox. The email from Cameron arrived the same week the Forbes article was published. It had been over 3 years since I'd heard his voice. Now, his name sat quietly in my inbox, folded between calendar reminders and funding requests. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The subject line read, "Proud of you, sis." The message was short, full of hollow congratulations and small talk. He said he'd seen the article and wanted to reconnect. "Family should stick together," he wrote. "Maybe we can catch up soon." There was no mention of our last conversation, no apology, no reference to the day they told me I wasn't wanted. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Dr. Simmons and read the message aloud during our session. She listened, then asked, "What do you want to do with it?" "I don't know," I said. "Part of me wants to ignore it. Part of me wants to remind him exactly what he said." She paused. "You don't owe them anything, but you also get to decide what peace looks like." That night, I hired a private investigator. I didn't want confrontation, I just needed the truth. Within a week, I had a report in my hands. The family home had been sold years ago. The store had shut its doors shortly after. Cameron was now working retail at a national home improvement chain. Mom was living in a small rental apartment in the Rainier Valley area. The most alarming detail was her health. She'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. Her insurance barely covered basic care. There were photos attached. In one, Diane stood on the porch of their apartment, bundled in a too large coat. Her face was thinner. She looked smaller somehow. Older than I remembered. I didn't call her. But I did something else. Through my attorney, I set up a private grant, an anonymous fund that would cover her medical treatment in full. The money was routed through a foundation that supported women undergoing cancer care. She would never know it came from me. Weeks passed. Cameron began emailing again, each message a little longer than the last. He talked about our childhood, about Dad, about how fast time goes. He said he was working on a business idea, something in home services, he wrote. Might have real potential. He didn't ask for money, not yet, but the implication hung over every line. Then the comments started appearing online. Under a news feature about Pathfinder's expansion, he wrote, "So proud of my little sister. Always knew she'd do big things." On another article, he claimed to have helped fund my early research. The worst came when he posted a photo of us as kids smiling on the front steps of the old house. The caption said, "Glad I could support her dream when no one else did. Just hope she remembers who had her back." It went viral. People from the startup community I barely knew shared it. Some believed it. A few emailed me congratulations for keeping family close. Amanda was the first to respond. She commented publicly correcting the story. "She showed up at my door on Christmas Eve," she wrote, "with a suitcase and nowhere to go." 2 other classmates followed. One shared how I'd worked 3 jobs through college. Another mentioned the time Cameron returned my mail unopened. The post disappeared by morning, but the damage had been done. Later that week, my assistant flagged a voicemail left after hours. "It's from Seattle," she said quietly. "You should probably hear it yourself." It was Mom. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. "Rebecca, it's Mom," she said. "I don't expect you to call back. I just wanted to say thank you. I don't know how this treatment became possible, but it's helping. And if you had anything to do with it, I'm sorry. For everything." She didn't say more. The message ended with a click and silence. I saved the recording. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Work kept moving. Pathfinder was preparing to open regional offices, and Seattle was high on the list. The expansion made sense. The market was strong. The investor interest was there. But I also knew what it meant. It meant going back. During a team strategy meeting, I approved the move. We'd open our Pacific Northwest office in the fall. I would oversee the launch personally. 3 months later, I stepped off a small chartered flight at Boeing Field, suitcase in hand. The city looked both familiar and unfamiliar. Coffee shops on every corner, cranes hovering over glass buildings, the sound of rain against the windshield of the car that picked me up. I stayed busy those first few days. Meetings, office tours, hiring interviews. It gave me a reason not to think too hard, but I knew I couldn't put it off forever. On the 4th day, I had my assistant book a private dining room at Canlis, a restaurant overlooking Lake Union, the kind of place where the quiet hum of conversation never turned into noise. I sent the invitation to both Cameron and Diane. It said only Thursday, 7 p.m., I'll be there. They arrived 5 minutes late. Mom wore a headscarf and carried a small purse with both hands. Cameron looked like he hadn't slept well in weeks. His hair was thinning. His eyes darted around the room before settling on mine. "Rebecca," Mom said softly. Her voice shook. I nodded. "Please sit." Cameron gave a half smile and looked around. "This place is incredible. Can't believe we're really here." I ordered wine. The server took our menus and disappeared. We made small talk at first. Cameron asked about local real estate. Mom mentioned an article she'd read about my foundation. Then slowly he brought it up. "I've been working on a business concept," he said, leaning forward. "Something local, scalable. You know, connecting homeowners with vetted contractors. Sort of a modern take on what Dad built." He went on about market research and cost structure. I listened. Eventually he said, "I think $500,000 would get us started. You could be a silent partner. I'd handle the rest." I set down my glass. Before I said anything, I looked at Mom. "I'm not here to invest," I said quietly. "Not until we talk about what happened." The room fell silent. Cameron looked away. Mom stared at her hands. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I need to know you see it. What you said. What you did." Mom finally met my eyes. "We were wrong," she said. "I was wrong." Cameron said nothing. Cameron's fork rested on the edge of his plate untouched. His shoulders slumped just enough for the tension to show. Mom's eyes were still glassy, fixed on a folded napkin in her lap. I set my glass down and let the quiet hold for a few moments longer. "I didn't bring you here to embarrass you," I said, "but I need to speak plainly." Cameron nodded once tight. "Go ahead." I looked at Mom first. "I've known about your diagnosis for a while. I hired someone to check in after Cameron's emails started coming. When I found out you weren't getting the care you needed, I set up a medical grant in your name. Quietly. Anonymously." Her hand lifted to her mouth. She didn't speak. I continued, "You've been receiving treatment through a foundation I fund. I arranged the paperwork so you wouldn't know it was from me." Mom blinked quickly and looked away. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, I replied, but I want the facts to be clear before we talk about anything else. Cameron's voice came next, low and strained. You could have told us. I met his eyes. Would you have accepted the help if you knew it came from me? He didn't answer. I took a breath. I'm not here to punish anyone. I came because I'm willing to consider building something new, but not on the old terms. Cameron shifted in his seat like he was trying to decide how to respond. You said you had a business idea, I said. I'm not investing. That's not what this is. His jaw flexed, but he stayed silent. I went on. However, Pathfinder is hiring for our Seattle office. If you're serious about starting over, there's an entry-level position open in customer support. You'll be trained like everyone else. No shortcuts, no titles. He looked stunned. You're offering me a job. I'm offering a chance. Whether or not you take it is up to you. Mom cleared her throat softly. And me, I've purchased a house near the new clinic. Quiet neighborhood. Small garden. It's yours if you want it. No rent, no catch. I just want you to have stability while you heal. She reached across the table, her fingers hovering over mine. Why would you do this for us? Because Dad asked me to build a life without bitterness. And because I believe people can change if they're willing to do the work. I waited a beat before continuing. But I have 3 conditions. Cameron exhaled. Of course. First, I said every post, every comment, every lie you've shared about helping me succeed, you take it all down. And you never say those things again. Not online. Not in person. He gave a small, reluctant nod. Second, we go to therapy. Each of us individually. Then together. No performative apologies, no brushing things aside. We talk about what actually happened. Mom folded her napkin with trembling hands. I'll do that. Cameron stayed quiet. Third, I said we go at my pace. This isn't a reunion. It's a beginning. I'm not promising forgiveness, and I'm not asking for any declarations. I just want to move forward carefully. Cameron finally spoke. What happens if I mess this up? I looked at him. Then we stop, and we go our separate ways. He nodded once slowly. I pushed my chair back. The server brought the check. I paid without ceremony. No one objected. As we stood to leave, Mom paused by the entrance. Would it be all right to hug you? I held her gaze. Not tonight, I said gently. Maybe sometime. She nodded a little shakily. Cameron didn't speak again. He followed her into the car. I stood beneath the awning and watched their taillights disappear into the quiet Seattle evening. It wasn't closure, but it was the beginning of something that might become honest if we all chose to show up. 6 months later, I sat in a quiet office on the 5th floor of a building near Pioneer Square. The rain tapped gently against the windows as I waited for the session to begin. The therapist, Dr. Lorraine Patterson, greeted each of us with a calm nod as we took our places. Cameron sat at one end of the couch, his arms crossed loosely, trying to look comfortable. Mom took the middle spot, her scarf neatly tied, hands folded. I chose the chair across from them. We'd agreed on this layout. It gave us space, and that mattered. Rebecca, Dr. Patterson began, "Would you like to start today?" I hesitated, then nodded. There's been progress. Cameron has been showing up at work on time. He's learning fast. And Mom and I have dinner once a week, no business talk. Mom smiled faintly and nodded. Dr. Patterson turned to her. Diane, how has it been for you? I've been keeping a journal, she said, writing memories of Rebecca's childhood, times I overlooked things. I didn't realize how often I downplayed her accomplishments to spare Cameron's feelings. Cameron shifted in his seat. He didn't speak right away. Cameron, Dr. Patterson prompted. The job's harder than I expected, he said. But I like helping customers. I think I'm good at it. He paused, glanced down at the floor. And the health insurance. I couldn't have given that to Mom. I see that now. I looked over at him, waiting. I blamed you for a lot of things, he added, but mostly because I couldn't face how much I'd failed. Dr. Patterson let the room settle before she spoke again. What I see is 3 people learning how to relate to each other as adults, not through old family roles. She turned a page in her notes. Let's talk about your father. The mention of Dad brought a stillness to the room. Mom adjusted her scarf. Cameron looked at the ceiling. I felt my throat tighten. He believed in all of us, Mom said softly, but he was the glue. After he got sick, we came apart. "He always supported you," Cameron said, looking straight at me. "Even when I didn't, even when Mom was scared. He never stopped believing in you." I nodded slowly. I used to resent that he continued. I thought it meant I was less. But it wasn't about that. I see that now. He paused, searching for the right words. "I should have been proud. I should have told you that sooner." It wasn't dramatic, but it was the first time he'd said it with no excuses. After the session, we stepped out onto the wet sidewalk. The air smelled of damp leaves and espresso from a nearby cart. Mom turned to me. "Would you come over this weekend? I found Dad's pot roast recipe." "I'd like that," I said. In the months that followed, therapy continued. Slowly, honestly. Cameron earned a promotion to team lead in the customer experience department. He had a knack for listening to small business clients, especially the ones who didn't speak tech. Mom's health improved steadily. She joined a cancer survivors group, volunteered at the community garden. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since before Cameron was born. I bought her a small 3-bedroom house close to the office. Quiet street little garden out back. The deed stayed in my name, but I never reminded her of that. It was her home now. At our first dinner there, the conversation felt awkward. Mom fussed over the roast. Cameron offered to do dishes twice. But as the months passed, the routine started to feel natural. We weren't the family we used to be, but we were becoming something new. Dr. Patterson noticed it too. "You're not rewriting the past," she said at one session. "You're building a future that includes it, but doesn't revolve around it." We all nodded. Christmas came quietly that year. The house Mom now called home was filled with the faint scent of pine and cinnamon. Outside, soft snow dusted the garden she tended in warmer months. I arrived early with James, who carried a casserole dish and wore a new blue sweater he'd picked out himself. Inside, the table was set with old family china, the same faded green pattern I remembered from childhood. Mom had painted place cards by hand, one for each of us, and extras for the guests she insisted on including. Cameron brought his girlfriend Shannon, a kindergarten teacher with a bright laugh and gentle eyes. She placed a tin of homemade cookies on the counter and offered to help in the kitchen without fuss. Dinner was a blend of new and old traditions. James stirred gravy while Mom fussed over the rolls. I mashed potatoes and set out napkins, glancing at Shannon's painted fingernails as she placed silverware around the table. Cameron brought out a bottle of cider. For a moment, it felt like we were playing at being a family, but something about it felt honest, not forced. After dinner, we gathered in the living room with mugs of coffee and a fire flickering on the hearth. Mom passed around small gifts, her own paintings, each one chosen to match our personalities. She gave James a watercolor of the Seattle skyline, saying she'd painted it from memory after hearing him describe his favorite buildings. Cameron handed me a slim box wrapped in gold paper. "It's not much," he said, voice low, "but I think Dad would want you to have it." Inside was a pocket watch, the gold dulled by years of use. I turned it over in my palm, tracing the initials engraved on the back. "Mom gave it to me after the funeral," Cameron said, "but it belongs with you." I nodded, words caught in my throat. I closed my fingers around the watch and felt its steady tick. Shannon settled beside Cameron and asked Mom about the garden. James went into the kitchen to wash dishes, refusing my protests about letting guests clean. I slipped onto the balcony for a breath of cold air. Cameron joined me after a minute holding 2 mugs of cocoa. He handed one to me and leaned against the railing. The city lights shimmered beyond the trees. For a while we stood in comfortable silence. "I want to say something," he began, "not because of tonight, not because things are better now, just because it's time." I waited. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, for everything, for what I said, for what I didn't say, for what I let happen, not because you're successful or because you helped us, but because what we did was wrong. You didn't deserve it." I looked at him. There was nothing defensive in his face, only honesty. "I know," I said. "Thank you." The snow had started falling again, heavy and slow. Cameron reached over and squeezed my shoulder. We went back inside where Mom and Shannon were setting out slices of pie, and James was telling a story that made everyone laugh. Later, as we gathered for dessert, Mom raised her glass. "To family," she said quietly, "the one we lost, the one we're rebuilding, and the ones we welcome." Everyone echoed her words. That night, after everyone had gone and the dishes were done, I stood in the living room alone. The lights on the tree glowed softly, reflecting in the window. For the first time in years, I felt at home. The holidays faded into winter, and the quiet days that followed gave me space to notice the small ways our family had changed. Cameron stopped by the house most weekends, sometimes bringing Shannon, sometimes just himself. He never came empty-handed. One Sunday, he arrived with a flat of daffodil bulbs for Mom's garden, laughing that he had no idea how to plant them, but he wanted to try. Mom had started leaving her easel in the kitchen, half-finished landscapes filling the corners with gentle color. She invited neighbors in for coffee, filling the rooms with warmth I hadn't felt since childhood. I settled into a rhythm of my own, balancing trips between San Francisco and Seattle, sharing dinners with Mom, and walking through the garden when the weather allowed. James and I grew close, but I no longer rushed the feeling or worried if things would last. For the first time in years, I trusted that I would be all right, no matter what happened. Sometimes I would look at the old pocket watch still ticking steadily in my drawer and think of Dad's quiet belief in me. It was the kind of strength that didn't need to be spoken. Cameron's life took on new shape, too. He earned a promotion at Pathfinder, working hard to win trust rather than demand it. The old bitterness faded, replaced by an openness I hadn't seen in him before. Mom's health held steady, her hair returning in soft gray waves. She painted the garden in every season, and on her 60th birthday, I arranged a small show at a local gallery. Seeing her beam as people admired her work reminded me how much possibility can return when pain is finally set down. We didn't erase the past. We carried it with us, sometimes awkward, sometimes tender, always real. I learned that justice doesn't always come as a grand reckoning. Sometimes it's the quiet dignity of drawing boundaries and offering a second chance, not out of obligation, but out of choice. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting what happened or letting go of the life I'd built for myself. It meant deciding to move forward, even if trust was rebuilt slowly. If there's one thing I hope you'll remember from my story, it's that the worst betrayals can sometimes be the soil where new roots take hold. Dignity, kindness, and resilience grow quietly over time, shaping a life far richer than any one moment of loss or triumph. If you've faced rejection or hurt from those closest to you, I hope you find comfort in knowing you are not alone. Sometimes the family we create through healing courage and the willingness to try again becomes the truest one of all. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, I hope you'll share your thoughts below or pass it along to someone who might need it. Remember, you are worthy of love, respect, and a life defined by your own strength.